Village Boy again. Thank you for all you have done, subscribing to our channel, sharing with friends, and watching and making comments about our previous videos. We do appreciate that. We do not take this for granted. Don't stop doing that. Don't stop sharing, watching, and tell your friends who have not subscribed to subscribe to our channel. Yeah, today I want to take on a new topic also, which is related to the issue of our previous videos. In previous videos, we'll be talking more about costing, various elements, various aspects of costing. And of course, in most of our example, we have used manufacturing outfit, those who are into producing one thing or the other. Yes, it is a bit more complicated or a bit more complex, the costing in production environment, which is a bit distinct from those in the service industry, service environment. The cost structure is almost still the same, but I want to explain some distinguishable factors, about the service industry and the manufacturing, those who produce this. It doesn't matter whether it is a sophisticated production or it's just a simple production like somebody producing sachet water, at the back of his house or whatever. So it's basically the same process. Like I said in one of the other video, elements of course are just three: materials, labor, and overhead. So in manufacturing or in production, those who are producing something or the other, they spend more materials. There is even some instances where you can have almost 60 to 70% of their costs components to be materials. Most of the time, well over 50% of their costs are on materials. And of course, the next cost that follow that is labor, because most manufacturing require intensive labor. So you see a lot of aspect of the labor depending on the extent of the manufacturing, because you need a whole lot area of people, from security to storekeeper. Even you have different storekeeping. You have the store for raw materials that come in. You have the store for finished products. Then you have suppliers store, and all that. So for stationaries, for office stationaries and all that, which also themselves their material, but they are still used as a kind of indirect materials. Then you see labor, because before many factories are automated, most small-scale industries, most small-scale manufacturing, they require a lot of labor, so a lot of hands to be engaged. So you see also the next cost in terms of hierarchy is usually labor. Then you go to overheads, which comprises of virtually every other cost that are not materials or they are not labor. So that is why you see, like I said in one of the video, in most manufacturing, you see they have a very tiny margin, because they spend a lot on materials, they spend a lot on even direct labor, especially factory hands and all that, maybe also a portion of the supervisor salary. So you see, when you see this, the cost of sales for them is usually very huge. You see, they could have, the total cost, the cost of sale could have taken close to sometimes 70 to 80% of the total cost, for such an organization. So you see them heavy on materials and very low on overhead. So in the hierarchy, you see them material is high, then followed by labor, then followed by overheads. In service industry, it's not the same thing. In most service industry, you see them, they have a kind of high margin. Actually, in service industry, most of the time, you cannot even break down their service into a unit as you want to break product is a unit whereby you have your direct labor, your direct material, your direct labor, and your direct overhead. Usually, excuse me, in service, it's a different ballgame altogether. So what you have is you have a very minimal material, very minimal, and you have even sometimes you don't have a direct labor per se. Then there are some instances you can still have direct labor, especially in some industries. Then you have minimal direct overhead. So in terms of service industry, it is not unusual to have a very narrow cost of sale and a very huge gross profit. And this is also where some who may not understand the significance of those numbers, they see their gross profit and they begin to spend. They go on a spending spree. And that is why I explained in previous video that your gross profit is not your bottom line, because the tendency, the temptation is always there. You see this huge amount of gross profit and you say, oh, let's keep spending. Now, the indirect costs are usually very more huge in service industry. And out of these direct costs too, indirect costs rather, you find out that materials, maybe office stationery, printing material, another thing, and depending on the nature of service you are rendering, they are very minimal. The huge aspect in service industry is labor, salaries and wages. I recollect there was a time I was doing some analysis for a client, and when I show him the percentage of labor to total overall cost, he said, this is too much. Well, I mean, why are we spending so much money on salaries and wages? I said, what? Because your materials in service industry is the brains of the people. That is what you are extracting to render that service. In manufacturing, what they do is to convert to process material to get a product. In service, what you are doing, you are extracting the brains of people to render that service. So it is not unusual to have a very huge amount of a huge percentage of your cost being taken over by salaries and wages. Even in some instances, you can have close to 70 to 80% of your total cost to be on salaries and wages in service industry. There's nothing unusual about it, because it is a brain work. You are rendering the people brain, even those ones that are not completely brain work, like maybe delivery, is still human effort that you need to render that service. Unlike in production, unlike when you are producing, you have to buy the material, you have to process the material to get your finished product and take your finished product to the market. So in product setting, the heaviest cost is on materials. In service industry, the heaviest cost is on labor, because that is the fulcrum, that is the center of operation, is the brain of the people, literally speaking, that you are extracting in service industry to generate your revenue. So it's not anything unusual to have a very high percentage of your cost as salaries or allowances, anything that is labor related. So service industry is unfortunately, we don't think it to be a labor intensive scenario, but it is, because all you are doing is the brain of people you are using. So you need minimum materials, you need minimum overheads. Now, why am I making this? Why am I disagreeing with this? Because when you look at, for instance, you want to look at your break-even point in service industry, you are looking at your margin as very big. And of course, again, I said earlier on, you cannot even break down services into units as you would do for product. So when you see a huge gross profit and you are not mindful that, that's your cost of sale is just a very insignificant amount of your total cost, you may make a mistake of spending what you are not expected to spend. And that is why you see so many service industry, you see employers not able to pay the salaries of workers, and the workers will be complaining, oh, but we are making a lot of money. It's the CEO, is the MD, is the director that are spending all the money, and all those kind of things. Because when they see the gross profit and they mistake it for the bottom line, they can go on spending. Meanwhile, the greatest chunk of the cost are indirect costs. So the cost of salary, the cost of rent, the cost of electricity, the cost of postages, the cost of advertising, all those other costs. Yes, in some service industry, like in other firm, you charge you have the hour rate depending on the number of the categories of staff who work in there. But then that doesn't mean, it's just a way of the easiest way of able to determine the price you are going to charge, for a service that's going to be rendered. So you look at the number of hours that it will take to execute the project or the contract, and then you look at the category of staff that you are going to put into it. So based on that, then you add your own, you still do your own markup too. So to arrive at the price you will charge your client for the service you want to render. Again, you will see that that's hourly rate. Why is it not the same thing for everybody? Because you are saying that the level of expertise each person is bringing to the job is different. So therefore, what you are going to charge per hour per person is going to be different. So that's the the cost of sales, the direct cost for them, for that such kind of industry, is the number of hours and the categories of people who will render that. Because what you are doing, you are simply extracting the brain of the employees or the workers who will execute that service contract. So in manufacturing, you spend the highest percentage of your cost come from materials, because it's material that you are converting into products. No matter how simple the production is, you spend more on material. It could range between 60% and above. Meanwhile, in the service industry, what are you doing? You are extracting the brain, that word extracting in quote, of people. So 60 to 70% of your cost will be labor related. So you pay for. So when you are doing comparative analysis, maybe you have a business, you have two businesses. One is manufacturing, and the other one is render service, and you want to compare the labor cost, and you will see the labor cost in manufacturing very, very minute. Maybe coming second. Sometimes it may even be the least of the cost. Sometimes because you have situation that depending on the kind of overheads you incur, you may find out that labor may even drop to third, to the least of the cost. So you have material overhead, then you have labor. So if you want to compare that with the service industry, maybe you have a service business that has very significant material, maybe some reasonable overheads, and a very huge labor, and you want to complain, which is natural to man. But why are we spending so much money on labor in this business, and we are spending very little on other business? It's because, yes, you still go through the same structure of material overhead, because of the fact that service is different, with the area they incur costs. Yes, you see the same kind of stuff, but the weight of the cost fall more on labor in service, whereas it falls heavily on materials in production. And it is very important to understand these differences, especially when sometimes that is why you see it seems that those people in service industry seem to earn more than those in production, because Of course, production gets employ more people than service most of the time. So this is one of the reasons for that, because you're already incurring very big cost on material in production, and probably a very semi-heavy cost on overheads, especially in the place whereby you have to supply your own electricity, where you don't have a public electricity. So that increase your overhead very substantially, and that's because of that, overhead may overtake the percentage of labor input into the business. Does it mean that labor is not important in manufacturing? No, it is still as important as anywhere else. But you know that in manufacturing too, it's not only labor that is involved in the process. Machines are also involved. So even in this way, most manufacturing are automated. So, but you still need human intervention here and there and all that. So that is why you see that the component of labor, in terms of the overall percentage, cost structure, cost evaluation in manufacturing, labor will always take number one. I mean, the material will always take number one. There is no contest about that. Whereas the converse is the case in service industry. In service industry, labor will take number one, no matter what you are doing. Labor is where you incur the chunk of the money. It is only in rare occasion, very rare, and very uncommon to have overhead, becoming the number one cost element in service industry. The number one is usually, be labor. So because you are tapping into the brain of people to do it. So when we talk about service industry, for instance, let's say you are in a courier service, so you need the drivers, you need the to deliver goods and all that. So you need minimum material to do that. You buy a bike or a vehicle, you fuel it and everything, then you need the driver to do it. So then the back end officers who will do your accounting, your marketing, your everything. So it's more technically a brain work. The guy taking call and recording, channeling the product and all that, customer service and all those ones. Whereas in manufacturing, what do? You produce and you sell and you set it out. You sell it. You send them out to either to distributor or to direct customers. So the major chunk of costs in manufacturing is material. Sometimes there could be change of swapping of position between labor and overhead, but in most ideal situations, labor may take number two. And then in some other cases they may take number three. But in service, labor is usually number one, because it is about people ideas, it's about people brain you are tapping into to render that service. That is why in most professional services, look at their cost structure. Look at the percentage of what goes to labor. It will be in the region of 60 to 80%. That is almost the standard. And this is very significant, especially if you are a non-accounting professional and you want to go into business. You have to understand this. If you are in the service, there's every likelihood you will pay more for labor than you pay for materials. And if you want to go into production, your cost, the chunk of your cost will come from materials. Buy materials that you will process to the product. So this help you to understand how you probably fix the salaries you want to pay those who want to engage. It doesn't mean also that because you are manufacturing, you should not pay good salary to your worker. That's not what I'm saying. what I'm saying simply, like, when you understand your cost structure, that there is every likelihood, there is a fact that if you are producing, you will spend more money on material that you acquire to produce. Especially, there are some production process that you have close to different components, 5-6 different materials you will buy to put together to produce. So that takes a lot of the money, and of course this helps you in your budgeting, it helps you in your planning, it helps you in your your cost reduction mechanism, because if you don't understand this, it becomes a bit difficult to manage your costs very well. So pay attention to that. Remember that in manufacturing, the chunk of your cost will come from materials, either direct and indirect materials. When you put all them together, they take a very substantial percentage of the total cost. Then there are instances that your overhead will be more than labor, but in this situation, labor should come second, then overheads. Then in the service industry, no contest, labor takes the lion's share of your cost, because it is about human effort, human service, human brain that you are extracting to render that service. Post-professional firm, from accounting to lawyer to engineering, consulting businesses, it is more about labor. You are paying for your consultants, you are paying for your strategies, you are paying for all this. That is the structure. Then minimum material, sometimes material come last. Overhead, of course you need some overhead to be able to also render those services. Then in rare case too, you might see material taking number 2, but that's not usually common. Usually the overheads, other overheads, because that are not labor, they are not material, will take number 2, and material will come last. It's like the swap position, between the manufacturing and service industry. This information, these tips are very important, especially for those of you who want to just decide which kind of business you want to run, so you understand it. But the bottom line is like, hey, don't forget what your bottom line is. It's your profit after tax, except where you are not on a tax holiday. When you are on a tax holiday, then your bottom line is your net profit. But for manufacturing, you may have a very narrow gross profit, and for service, you may have a very huge gross profit. However, the difference is like in manufacturing, indirect costs are lower than direct costs in most cases, very usually. Then in service, indirect costs are heavier than the direct costs, because almost all the salaries and wages of professionals and everything are regarded as indirect costs, because you cannot trace them to a unit. You can't break services to units the way you break product into units. If you are producing fountain pen, you can cost it to one unit. But if you are doing an audit of a company, you can't break it down to units. So this is very important. Pay attention to this. We still continue to reach to you on many other business tips. Thank you for those who have subscribed. Don't make sure you put on your notification so that each time we drop a new video, you are immediately alerted and go and watch it. And as you watch it, like I said the other time, don't keep good things to yourself alone. Share with your friends, and we also welcome comments. Thank you for those who have been putting comments. Please share with your friends and encourage them to also subscribe, so that together we continue to do this for a long time to come. Thank you. Have a good day.